The House will come to order. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there is no objection, we'll take action on these motions first. Hearing no objections, the motions prevail. Motions and resolutions.
Pursuant to Article 4, Section 19 of the Constitution of the State of Minnesota, Schomacker moves that the rule therein be suspended and an urgency be declared, and that the rules of the House be so far suspended so that Senate File Number 4476, now on the General Register, be given its third reading and be placed upon its final passage.
I recognize the maker of the motion, the member from Rock, Representative Schomacker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we wanted to move, this is the Human Service Program Integrity Package for the year, and we wanted to move this along given that we have a week left in session. We wanted to make sure that we had the chance to do a conference committee on this bill and give it its full consideration. And so in order to do that, given the time that it takes to put one of these massive bills together, we need to do this urgency so we can have the bill to conference as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This is needed for us to get going with the bill, so I'll ask all members to vote green. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion on the motion to declare an urgency, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. The motion is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The Chief Clerk will report the amendment. And before we do so, before the author explains the bill, we have an amendment from the desk to insert the House language into Senate File Number 4476. The Clerk will report the amendment.
Schomacker moves to amend Senate File Number 4476, the third engrossment, as follows. The amendment is coded DEA 4338.
I recognize the member from Rock, Representative Schomacker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our language is better than the Senate's, and so we'd like to discuss that.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Knorr.
I agree with Chair Schomacker, so we should vote green.
All those in favor of accepting the DE amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The Chief Clerk will report the amendment.
Schomacker moves to amend Senate File Number 4476, the third engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded S4476A7.
I recognize the maker of the amendment, the member from Rock, Representative Schomacker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the A7 amendment is one technical fix that we needed to make to the bill. When we were passing it out of Ways and Means, we had one understanding of part of the prepayment review portion, and that was different when we looked at it again, and so this clarifies that it would be all fee-for-service systems that would be used for the prepayment review process. Thank you.
Further discussion. I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Knorr.
It's a good amendment. Please vote green.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The Chief Clerk will report the amendment.
Schultz moves to amend Senate File Number 4476, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A5.
I recognize the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and glad we have the chance to debate Senate File 4476 with the House language today. Credit where due to Chairs Schomacker and Knorr to get us to this point. And members, as we enter debate this afternoon and evening, I encourage us to really work on the things that can enhance program integrity, can work on preventing fraud, and in addition to that, Mr. Speaker, also ensure that we have eligible recipients receiving medical assistance. And so the A5 amendment, which is being delivered to you at this moment in time, is a very important amendment because it would eliminate a sunset that is coming on January 1st of 2027, which is a report that has been in law for nearly a decade at this point. And it's important, members, because this report helps ensure that we have the right people receiving welfare benefits in Minnesota. And this report should be delivered to the chairs every single fall. But despite the fact that this was put into law nearly a decade ago, this report has only been delivered 2 times. 2 times in nearly 10 years since this was originally passed. And of most note to members here, this periodic data matching report is one that helps ensure that people who are receiving benefits from the state, from taxpayers, that they are truly eligible. And the concern here is if we, as the legislature, more specifically the given chairs of the committee, if they aren't receiving the report, we actually have no level of confirmation as to whether or not the agency is doing their job to ensure that this is happening. This is a pretty simple report where if the agency is doing their job, if they have been doing periodic data matching, if we are ensuring the right people are on the program, it should not be difficult to deliver the report. And so what this simple amendment does is it removes the sunset. It just says that as we move forward, the agency, the department, must deliver this report to us to ensure that we have the appropriate guidelines in place, that the department is delivering the report to the legislature. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask for a roll call on this amendment.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think one important measure, especially in wake of the entire conversation that we've been having today, and I'm still hoping to get a copy of this amendment in paper form if one of our pages have it. Thank you. One of the key things and important parts here is that this literally, if this work is done, if we are doing periodic data matching, it saves the state tens of millions of dollars on an annual basis. This is not something that is controversial. In fact, many other states do this. They not only do periodic data matching, but they also require the report. This should be common sense. This should be a board that we're able to light up green because, members, it's incredibly important that we have this data. Otherwise, the public lacks the trust that this is actually happening, especially in light of what we did earlier today, which was allowing for more money to be spent on medical assistance. We need to know that the people are actually eligible to be receiving medical assistance. So this amendment is all about ensuring that we remove the sunset for periodic data matching, which ensures that the appropriate people are receiving welfare benefits. With that, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to our conversation on the A5 amendment. Thank you.
Discussion. I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to inform the body that we did receive the report that was due on time, a little bit delayed because of the mechanism that existed. When the process changed during the pandemic, there was a stop of using the periodic data matching. So at that point, there was no report that we were able to receive. But as I speak, I think any member who wants to see the report, I can send it to you. You can request it, and I'll give it to you. And quite frankly, with the HR1 changes, there's a lot of requirement of all these changes. So this is something that is being discussed, how to do it, because also it changes the number of times that we do periodic data matching. And if you read the bill from Chair Barker, I think there are some few provisions about periodic data matching. So what I'll say is, members, this is just not the appropriate way to build it because there are changes required through the HR1, and I'll ask you to vote no on this amendment and let Chair Burke and Bierman to negotiate with the Senate.
Further discussion to the amendment. I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Schultz, for bringing this amendment. This is an important amendment, and I hate to correct my friend Chair Noor, but the facts as were presented in our hearing in the Fraud Committee on this on March 9th are different than what was just stated. So periodic data matching was paused during the pandemic, and at the end of the public health emergency in 2023, they were required to restart periodic data matching. That meant the next report would have been due in 2024. Well, here we were, March 9th of 2026, and the report had still not been delivered to the legislature. So we had a hearing on it, and lo and behold, 11 days later, the report was delivered. So the department has failed in its obligation to do the periodic data matching and to fulfill its reports to the legislatures, and we should not let this reporting requirement sunset. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I recognize a member from Cass, Representative Knutson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Schultz, for this amendment. Periodic data matching. In 2015, this was put into state statute. They were given over $1 million at that time to implement this report, and $400,000 ongoing since then. But we haven't been receiving this report. In 2019, we received our first periodic data matching report from the Department of Human Services, and in that report, it shows that over 20,000 people were disenrolled from these services. Over 20,000 people were on these services getting these benefits that weren't eligible. In 2020, our second and final report, over 17,000 people. And then it stopped. All the reporting stopped because of COVID. But at the end of 2023, when the pandemic was finally over, that reporting did not restart. And we know during that time, the number of people that enrolled in these programs grew astronomically. But we hadn't got a report since. This is common sense, you guys. This is basic checks and balances. There is no reason why we're not verifying that the people that are receiving these benefits are actually eligible to receive these benefits. We have hardworking, tax-paying people in our state that are struggling to make ends meet. And here we are saying that we can't even mandate a report from the department to make sure that the people that are receiving these benefits are eligible. This is crazy. Thank you, Representative Schultz, for this amendment. This is a common sense, no-brainer. Extend the sunset. We have to make sure that we're using the taxpayer dollars the way they were meant to be used. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Repeatedly, the last several years, we've had audits in which there have been reports that were supposed to be done. They didn't do them. Along with that, they've had multiple other things, site visits, et cetera, that they aren't doing. The reports that the legislature says, hey, we need these reports so that we understand what's going on. We can see there are problems. We can fix them. They're not showing up, and this is not the only area. It's past time that we say, do your job, do it correctly, and give us the information we need to support the programs that the people need, to do them right. Don't have them on autopilot or like a Waymo that is driving around and is not doing it proper operations. That's what we've got. They're not doing the job. They're not doing the reports. And frankly, this amendment should be made multiple times for almost every area because we are the ones that have the duty to see things are done right. We are the ones that have the rule-making authority that we've abdicated, that we need to take back and fix. It starts with knowing what's going on, starts with this amendment, and having them do what we've been paying them to do for years.
I recognize a member from St. Louis, Representative Zalesnikar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say to the members that last year, this committee was faced with doing $1 billion in cuts to those who actually receive services. We've seen what happens when there's sham companies that start that never deliver a service. And it seems to me to be just straightforward common sense that we would want to know who's actually getting services, that they're eligible for services, when we have data that says in one year 20,000 people were not eligible, another year 17,000, and then we get no reports to the Human Service for whoever's chairing. That doesn't even seem responsible for the House or the Senate. So I want to make sure that Minnesota taxpayer dollars are available for the aging seniors that we have that are turning 80 this year in greater Minnesota, in the metro, and all those on disability services and group homes, that we have money. We should have enough money to allocate to these programs. And we should have the data. So members, I think it's common sense to vote for this amendment. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Well, thanks, Mr. Speaker. Members, I would encourage a green vote on this amendment, and here's why. Last week, we passed the OIG bill out of here, and the Senate got it right today. They repassed it, so it's on the way to the governor's office. The data that would be contained in this report that Representative Schultz is trying to extend out there might be quite illustrative to said OIG. And why are we putting up votes for the OIG and then running away from carrying this forward? I haven't heard why. I've just heard that, oh, wait, we don't really need to do that anymore. You know, before that, I think 2 weeks ago, I made it even easier. You don't even have to print this report now. If you remember, Representative Kraft and I had a bill that allows you to send reports electronically. So you can continue to do the report, because we need to make sure that we're tracking who's getting what, when, where, and how much. And now you can just print it to PDF and send it to people. If you voted for the OLA bill because you're afraid of fraud and you want transparency and you want the people of Minnesota to be able to see what it is that they're paying for, this is a simple yes vote. A no vote says apparently you might have mixed feelings about how you voted for the OIG. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To underpin why this is important and why the board should all be green is because the departments have chosen not to report this time and time again. In fact, it took 2 different committee hearings this session in 2026 to get this report to be delivered. So time had to be spent from all of the members of the Human Services Committee and all the members of the Fraud Committee in order to get action from the Department of Human Services. So they've chosen not to follow statute as it is. And it's irresponsible for us to move forward and allow more money to be spent on something like this, and especially on medical assistance, when the department isn't accountable to us. But to keep this really simple, Mr. Speaker, and I'm kind of wondering, it almost looks like Chair Knorr might want to speak again. But to keep this really simple, this simply removes the sunset. So it says, members, that for periodic data matching, which, by the way, would remain in law, that the report must be delivered every year. Every single year without an expiration date, so that we can make informed decisions and we can ensure that the department is doing what statute says they must. Because of the disputed claims in 2025, Mr. Speaker, it turned out that nearly 40% of the discrepancies found through periodic data matching, nearly 40% of those folks were ineligible to be receiving medical assistance. Nearly 40%. Think about that. Think about the cost that is to taxpayers when people who are ineligible are receiving medical assistance. So we need to ensure that this report happens, that we are holding the departments accountable to what we expect from them, so that the roughly 3,100 people who were disenrolled because they were ineligible or didn't respond, that they are no longer on medical assistance, and we are protecting taxpayers' money. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I encourage every member of the House to vote green on this amendment that costs nothing but demands accountability from the Department of Human Services. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We're going to go a little bit out of order. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to correct, I think there's confusion about the report. If anybody is interested in the report, you can get it from Minnesota Legislative Reference Library, because that report was sent to the chairs, so we have the report about the PDM. And quite frankly, if you read what we have in terms of alignment with HR 1, which requires significant amount of real-time data matching, including several times that we will be doing the PDM. It's really important to understand that there are different components when it comes to Medicaid. We need to make sure that we're aligned with the federal government, and this bill doesn't help us do that. We have received the report. We understand the challenges. I think this is not the right way to bring this bill, and we need to understand how we should be able to accomplish that through the alignment with HR 1. So members, please vote no, because we're just creating another process, which we will keep on getting it. And I'm hoping that the Healthcare and Human Services team will fix down the road in how we get the reporting for data matching. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members.
Any further discussion? I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Bierman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I just wanted to, a couple more comments. Thank you, Chair Knorr. The numbers on the discrepancy, well, 91% had no discrepancy. Of the remainder, 59% of those were resolved discrepancies. 28% were coded incorrectly or that they did not respond. Only 13% of that smaller number were no longer eligible. And with HR 1 coming in soon, we will be doing double every 6 month mandatory, increased, more frequent data checks and matching. So now is not the time to put this into statute. We'll be doing more with HR 1, and I would ask the body to vote no. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Assuming that this will be the final comment on the amendment, I think it's important to recognize just how simple that this is. Members, to that point that Representative Bierman just raised a moment ago, he suggested moments ago that it should only be checked twice a year, though our own statutes say that this needs to be done every single month, and that people who are ineligible for these benefits, be it medical assistance or Minnesota Care, that they be checked for things to ensure that they are in accordance and alive, number one, that they're not dead. Number two, that they are up to speed with regards to their taxes. So the IRS information that they submit, it also means the information from the Social Security Administration. Those are the tools that we're using. We're talking about tools that are already in our toolbox, and this says that the agency, that the department specifically, must deliver a report annually that shares for us on a monthly basis, which is already law, Representative Bierman, that they are doing periodic data matching and that we have the data. Because the data that I shared with you earlier, moments ago, that was specifically for Minnesota Care. But the story on medical assistance, frankly, it's worse. It's beyond 40% of those with discrepancies that either didn't respond or were no longer eligible. So people were receiving medical assistance that were no longer eligible. Think about that. How much money is it okay for you to take from a middle-class family to go to someone who is ineligible for medical assistance? That's what this question's about, and ensuring the accountability. So removing this sunset is really very simple, and I look forward to your green vote. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Jones.
Here you go. Jones, no.
Jones votes no. Momani Hildsley.
Momani Hildsley, no.
Momani Hildsley votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 63 yeas and 67 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Schultz moves to amend Senate File number 4476, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A6.
I recognize a member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The A6 amendment speaks to a larger conversation that we've been having these last few weeks. And number one is how to address homelessness in Minnesota. I think that members should be rightly concerned that we have multiple departments seeking to solve the issue of homelessness in addition to our local partners on the local level. And a challenge that we have, members, is that we spend so much money, as highlighted earlier in our discussion on other bills today, on either homelessness prevention, homelessness, or I should say housing support for people who need it. And the question before us, members, is do we know what those dollars are going for? Do we know whether or not we are getting our desired outcomes for the money that we spend? I wish I could stand here today and tell you how much money the state chooses to spend to address homelessness. Because if you look at the data, members, this population of people impacted by homelessness in Minnesota honestly hasn't changed that much. It's gone up slightly, actually, and yet we're spending tens of millions of dollars to address homelessness in Minnesota, and it's hard for us to see a result. So, before you here in the A6 is an amendment to ensure that we are finding out the outcomes from the money that we spend in the homelessness programs that the Department of Human Services has. So this requires a report, and in addition, it makes sure that we find out how many people are served, what are the total costs of the programs, and what has been the change for people who have entered the program, and where have they gone from there? It also looks at having an appropriate analysis of other opportunities that would hopefully move those folks into either a more long-term, stable place or a local partner who provides housing services. And it looks at it to ensure that we're getting this information so that the legislature can make good decisions. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I would request a roll call on this amendment.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just one final thing. As we look at the opportunity before us, this also provides an opportunity for the state to recoup money if we aren't getting the appropriate reporting, so that these dollars that are being spent in housing to prevent homelessness, that money would be returning to the Department of Human Services and ultimately to the general fund if these programs are resulting in services to people without knowing how the money is spent. So again, another amendment before us today, that helps to ensure that we are protecting taxpayers. And I would ask for your green vote on the A6 amendment.
I recognize the member from Clay, Representative Keeler.
Thank you. Just want to encourage all of us on this side. This is a hard no for us. I just want to say, you maybe have been talking about homelessness for weeks. Some of us have been working on homelessness for decades. We get reports back now. This is something that we've been working on. I just want to say there has been a lot of people bipartisanly who have been working on homelessness to understand what it is our agencies need, what it is our organizations need, how they report back. And so would the author of the amendment yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Keeler.
I'm interested to know on 2.10 of your amendment, you say on here that you're interested in information regarding education level. I haven't seen that in other reports, not that they don't happen in other reports, but I'm interested in why that is something specific that you are looking to have reports on.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Keeler. The goal here is to ultimately help solve homelessness. I appreciate the work that you have focused on during your time in the legislature to prevent homelessness, which ultimately should be our goal. What this seeks to understand is, what is this population? Who is this population that is most impacted by homelessness, and how, through our state policies, are we going to address those issues to solve the problem so that taxpayers don't have to continue to foot the bill for the same people over and over, and instead, what can we do long-term to help get those folks into great jobs and into a place where they are able to provide for their own housing? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Keeler.
Thank you. It's really not an answer. So my next question, would the amendment author yield for another question?
He will continue to yield.
There's a lot of
Representative Keeler.
stakeholders that we have spent hours and hours and hours working on, and a lot of them are actually doing outstanding work with individuals who are unhoused to get them back into the marketplace, to work, to own houses. How many homelessness stakeholders have you met with prior to putting this amendment together?
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, and I'll reiterate what my purpose here with this amendment is. Number one, it's program integrity. Number two, it's to protect taxpayers. And number three, it's to ensure that we're doing everything in our power to move people off of homelessness and get people into long-term stable housing by having good jobs and having a more affordable way of life in Minnesota. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Keeler.
Thank you. I think we all have that goal, and the best way to do that work is in partnership with the amazing stakeholders that we have doing this work. Members, vote no.
Any further discussion? I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I was homeless. And frankly, looking at the programs, I support this. Because of my life experiences, I think we need to do a better job. So vote green.
Any further discussion on the amendment? I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We should always guide ourselves in the data. And what I want to point out for you for a second here is I'm just looking at the moment at point-in-time count results for the number of people who have been experiencing homelessness. And I also want to draw attention, despite the fact that this legislature for the last several years has put an enormous amount of money into housing and homelessness prevention in Minnesota. Mr. Speaker, during the Walz administration, homelessness has gone from before his time at 7,243 people to today, more than 1,100 people additionally impacted by homelessness, a total of 8,392. What we are doing, Mr. Speaker, is not working. We need to change course. We need to be solutions-oriented, and that is what this amendment, the A6 amendment, would do. It would help us be more solutions-oriented and be driven by data, and I ask for members' support. Vote green.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Jones. Jones. Momani Hildsley.
Momanya Hiltzley, no.
Momani Hiltzley votes no. Jones.
Go ahead.
Jones, no.
Jones votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 62 yeas and 67 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Schultz moves to amend Senate File Number 4476, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A8.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just going to work on bringing up the A8 amendment as members see it. If I remember correctly, as I am bringing this up, Mr. Speaker, this has to do with eligibility requirements for medical assistance, and in particular, what this does is ensure that people who have been convicted of a crime of violence would no longer be eligible for two programs. If I remember correctly, based upon the bill, this would impact both medical assistance and MFIP. And I believe that is my amendment, Mr. Speaker. And this is just really key and important that if there are people who have been convicted of those crimes of violence, that they not be eligible for these public programs. That is my goal with this amendment. And Mr. Speaker, I would request a roll call.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Certainly there are consequences to the things that happen in society. And when you have committed a crime of violence against a Minnesotan, you have been convicted of that crime, Mr. Speaker, you should be removed from receiving these public benefits. And so, Mr. Speaker, this is pro-taxpayer, this is pro-victim, and Mr. Speaker, I look forward to support of the A8 amendment.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Curran.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition of this amendment, and I do so because our Constitution clearly outlines what due process looks like and what the criminal justice system looks like. And it looks like people going through the court process, through the criminal conviction process, and serving a sentence whereby they lose privileges in society, they lose rights in society. But at the point where we as Minnesotans might say we also turn our back on health care, Mr. Speaker, is way too far beyond the scope of what we are required to do in the state of Minnesota and what we should do. I encourage members to vote no.
Any further discussion? I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will Representative Schultz yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Pinto.
Representative Schultz, under your proposal, would persons convicted of a crime of violence be able to receive treatment at emergency rooms? How would that work?
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment has to do with medical assistance. And so if they have their own personal private health insurance, they would be able to receive that care through that lens. But this just says that public programs for those convicted of a crime of violence would no longer be eligible for medical assistance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So Representative Schultz, somebody who is currently eligible for medical assistance by definition has a low income. So I guess if they don't have that private insurance, they wouldn't be eligible for medical assistance, and they receive some kind of grievous injury or something, go to emergency room. How would that work? Would they receive treatment in that emergency room under your amendment, sir?
You're asking
I am asking him to yield. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I believe that that would be in accordance with federal law.
Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Representative Schultz, I believe under federal law, the emergency room would have to treat that person. Under your amendment, the person would then, the funds for that to that hospital would not come from medical assistance or from the private insurance. So, Representative Schultz, under your amendment, wouldn't this increase uncompensated care costs for our hospitals and put our hospitals, both rural and urban, in greater jeopardy as a result of this passing? I understand that maybe other policy goals. I just want to clarify with the impact on our hospitals, if he will yield, Mr. Speaker.
He'll continue to yield. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, this is just saying that for taxpayer-funded medical assistance, that this would ensure that people who have been convicted, they've been convicted, not charged, convicted. They have been convicted of a crime of violence against a Minnesotan, that they would no longer be eligible for medical assistance. That's what this addresses. And so for those folks, ultimately, I hope that they're able to pay for their own medical care because they have been convicted of a crime of violence against Minnesotans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Schultz, I hope that they can pay for all the medical care themselves, of course. We want that as much as we possibly can. I guess it seems to me, and I feel like this is the answer you're giving, is that unfortunately, if they can't pay for that medical care, and federal law does require it be provided by emergency rooms, that's consistent, I think, with our moral sense that we don't want people just dying on the streets in front of our hospitals. That, in fact, will be paid for by, I suppose, taxpayers or by our communities through uncompensated care. So I just want to make sure that we're clear about the impact on our communities when doing this, that under your bill, you're going to have more folks going to our ERs and putting our hospitals in even worse financial shape. That may be a choice you want to make. We just want to make sure we're clear on that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Hicks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Will the author of the amendment yield?
He'll yield. Representative Hicks.
Representative Schultz, who pays for Anoka Metro Regional Treatment Center in DCT?
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hicks, I imagine that you have the answer to your question.
I do.
Representative Hicks.
Thank you so much. I do. So the Anoka Metro Regional Treatment Center is part of the direct care and treatment that we all authorize for payment here in the state. They bill back about 62% of the services that they provide to Minnesota Medicaid. Would the author yield for a question?
He will. Representative Hicks.
Representative Schultz, do you know the individuals who are at Anoka, how many of them are there because they have been convicted of a crime of violence and have a mental health condition?
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I would recommend to Representative Hicks that you tell the story that you wish to tell while I tell the story about how you presumably would like to allow for convicted criminals to be allowed medical assistance in Minnesota. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Hicks.
Sure, I'm happy to tell the story. The point is that direct care and treatment is a state-funded program. The Anoka Medical Treatment Center is a program that we fund. It houses lots of individuals who have been convicted of violent crimes or have not been, who've been convicted of violent crimes and who are mentally not well. They're dangerous, and so they are there. If we bill back about 62% of that to medical assistance. 51% of that is then matched by the federal government, which decreases Minnesota taxpayer dollars onto Anoka costs. So if we take medical assistance out of that equation, those people will still receive treatment at Anoka, and instead of being able to bill back medical assistance, we will just pay it out of the Minnesota General Fund. So that feels like a different way to cost taxpayers money to keep people who are not safe and unwell off our streets, which does not seem like a thing that we should do.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Cagle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I think that this is just a mean-spirited, bad public policy amendment that is just meant to show that you know, to just kind of be mean. I mean, we want people to have a chance. We want people to have a second chance. We want people to be healthy, well, have their mental health taken care of. And this is just dumb because we're putting more money on the back of taxpayers, making sure that people who need care can't get it. Let's think about public policy, not sound bites for social media.
Any further discussion to the amendment? I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Good amendment. Vote green.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't want to stand up and speak to this, but I just wanted to ask if the author of the amendment will yield for a question.
He'll yield. Representative Knorr.
Representative Schultz, have you looked into the federal requirement for Medicaid?
Representative Schultz, although you already gave your last speech, we'll ask you to yield for this one. Representative Schultz. Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to let the body know that under the federal law, 42 U.S.C. 139A.10 requires that everybody to be covered by Medicaid, meaning that these convictions that you have noted of violence is not criteria to deny anyone for that Medicaid benefits. That's the federal law. And quite frankly, we get 90% match for the expansion group, and the other groups, it's about 50%. So it means that we will be in no compliance with the federal requirement to cover individuals. Mr. Speaker, if the author of the amendment will yield for another question.
He will. Representative Noor.
Representative Schultz, do you know anything about the EMTALA?
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I find it fascinating that Representative Noor stands here on this floor talking about how my amendment would bring us out of compliance with federal law. The last time I checked, Representative Noor spent the winter telling us that Minnesota should be in non-compliance with federal law. Literally spent all winter long doing it, Mr. Speaker. That's what Representative Noor did. He said that we shouldn't obey federal immigration law.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
State your point of order.
Masons 124, personalities are not permitted in debate. When we keep saying Representative Noor did this, Representative Noor wants that, that is certainly in violation of Masons.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's just be clear. Representative Noor was not on his own. In fact, I'm fairly certain it was the vast majority of the folks on the other side of the aisle who joined in this goal of having Minnesota be non-compliant with federal law. So your argument saying that this amendment would somehow put us out of compliance with federal law, which it wouldn't, frankly, I find that argument to be hollow.
Representative Noor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't hear an answer to that because this amendment will put us out of order with the federal government. At the same time, I think the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, EMTALA, requires anybody who shows up in an emergency area to be covered under the federal law, which we have been hearing that. So saying that nobody will be covered means it doesn't help the state of Minnesota, and to be out of compliance does not help us. So please vote red.
Seeing no further discussion, we'll give the last word to the author of the amendment, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll just note a bit of irony. You know, it was just last week, if I remember correct, it was Thursday, where we had the vast majority of House Democrats who voted to be out of compliance with H.R. 1 and work requirements in that bill. That was Thursday of last week. So I'm sure that the argument made by Representative Noor really doesn't hold much water today.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Jones.
Jones, no.
Jones votes no. Momani Hiltzley.
Momani Hiltzley, no.
Momani Hiltzley votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 53 yeas and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Frederick moves to amend Senate File Number 4476, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A4.
I recognize the author from Blue Earth, Representative Frederick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the state of Minnesota, under substance use disorder services, we have peer recovery specialists. Those specialists are people with lived experience who are able to help people that are also struggling with substance use disorder. It is important that we put as much program integrity as possible into this bill, and we get some of that language from CMS. So my amendment makes sure that the bill language aligns with the language from CMS, which the goal is that any provider of peer recovery services has a background check, and that's good. But we want to make sure that we're also not the workers, the people, those peer recovery specialists that are the peers to people in with substance use disorder don't also have to go through this rigorous background check, because the whole point of this is that we're bringing people with lived experience to be peers under appropriate supervision to continue to provide those services. That is not a requirement from CMS, and so this amendment would make sure that our bill aligns with the federal requirements from CMS. And I'd request a roll call.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Frederick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think, if I remember correctly, Representative Gilman spoke up in committee, and she said that these people don't have shiny, I think is the word that you used, backgrounds. And that really resonated with me because it's right, it's accurate. And that's the point, though. So I would hope that I can get everyone's support.
I recognize the member from Meeker, Representative Gilman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, Representative Frederick, for this amendment. I, again, am so grateful for the folks that do the work, and I would encourage the body to vote green on this amazing amendment.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Jones.
Go ahead. Jones, aye.
Jones votes aye. Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momani Hiltsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 127 yeas and 0 nays, the motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will will report the amendment.
Schultz moves to amend Senate File Number 4476 as amended. The amendment is coded RA 26-020.
I recognize the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to give great credit to the chair of the Fraud Committee, Representative Robbins, as this is one of her pieces of legislation and something that the state should take action on to prevent fraud. And that is a lot of the work, and there is some work on this that is being done in this bill. However, what this next amendment does, again, the one that finishes in RA 26-020, is one that talks about the eligibility to receive public money. So it's essentially a financial screening tool that we should add and would be of benefit for us to ensure that someone who is providing services and performing services that they are able to provide the most recent they provide a look back for the last 3 years to ensure that they have everything in order financially. So financial records for the most recent 3-year period for a provider or vendor or individual that is a business or nonprofit, evidence of registration and good standing with the Secretary of State for the most recent 3-year period, and then a look back at their financial records. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm hoping that this is seen as a friendly amendment to enhance program integrity measures for all of those entities that help provide services, especially in the realm of human services, that we are providing solid financial screening. That is the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Discussion to the amendment. I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We don't have the amendment with us. I haven't received it. I haven't seen anybody. It's not posted online. Would like to read what the amendment states, Mr. Speaker.
Members, we'll take a tactical pause for it to be distributed. recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Things are moving a little bit slowly, but I just wanted to quickly ask the author of the amendment to clarify what is in section 2, number 2, that it states that if you are not providing services for the past 3 years, whether you're a new provider or a student who is now becoming a doctor, you are not authorized to enroll as a provider.
Representative Schultz will yield. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know if Representative Knorr finished his question. He kind of trailed off there, and I'd love a little bit more certainty as to exactly what question he
Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll make it clear. If anyone who's a provider, or even a new person who becomes a doctor wants to provide, to become a provider within the system so they can be reimbursed, this law will now state that they must have had work and shown that they have income for the past 3 years. So no new provider is allowed to be enrolled until they have financial records or statements for the past 3 years. That's number one. Mr. Speaker, if the author will yield to answer that question.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Knorr, for your intentional question. I think that this actually is pretty sound policy, and I want to kind of ground us in this. So this really talks about someone who's seeking to enroll, become licensed, or receive grant money, or register in any program that is administered by the commissioner, okay? So this is, to my knowledge, based upon my reading of this, Representative Knorr, this doesn't impact that individual doctor. This is talking about the vendor, the provider that is providing a service, and this ensures that we have that look back to ensure that they are a credible organization. Again, one of the greatest challenges that we have seen in Minnesota, especially as it relates to fraud, is what happens. Nearly overnight providers are stood up on the exact same location, dirt, and address as previous fraudulent providers. And what this says is we want to qualify those providers, those folks who are seeking to enroll, become licensed, or receive grant money to ensure that they are real, credible people who aren't going to waste the public's money, and so that the dollars aren't stolen in fraud.
Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to clarify, if you read A, it says any provider, vendor, or individual, because it shows the individual in there. So this is anybody who wants to become a provider. They must have audited financial reports for the past 3 years. I'm not trying to nitpick the whole bill, because also, Mr. Speaker, if the author of the amendment will yield for a question.
He will yield. Representative Knorr.
Just wanted to know if you have checked Representative Schultz 16B, I believe 981, which addresses the financial reports and the process that is required for any nonprofits who are applying for services through the state. The conditions that exist are now being put in this section, which is in the Medicaid area right now, which is also the same applicability. How will this work compared to what is already drafted extensively under that chapter?
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Knorr. The open question for the body is this: is what we're doing currently working? And the answer is absolutely not. In Medicaid alone, over the time of the Walz administration, it is clear that there has been over $9 billion in fraud in Medicaid-funded programs, in the 14 high-risk Medicaid-funded programs, waivered services. So, Mr. Speaker, I would argue to the body and to you, Representative Knorr, that despite every other state statute, And what is put into law in 16B, frankly, we need more teeth. We need more qualifications. We need to ensure that people who are providing these services, that they are who they say they are, and that they are providing the sort of care that is necessary that Minnesotans need, while not stealing the money to go to fraudsters. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think Representative Schultz needs to spend more time in the human services to understand this whole process. Because if you look at the bill itself, the provider enrollment process that is robust, that we're doing even before they get through the door. At the same time, we're putting the financial requirement within the bill, the underlying bill, which we are spending an extensive time to make sure that we vet people who are going to be providers before they even step in. It's in the bill. And also several sections within the bill addresses some of the concerns about during the enrollment and also post-enrollment process, and requiring that everybody who's now enrolled to be in compliance with those rules, otherwise they'll be kicked out. Their license will be suspended or even terminated if they're not in compliance. So that exists in the bill itself. So this is not the right way to put it, specifically when you're trying to exclude new providers. We don't know whether they're Minnesota-based or non-Minnesota-based. Anybody who's coming in, whether they're new doctors, new nurses who are providing services, they will not have a financial audited report. I can guarantee you that. So this amendment is not in good shape. It's not written in the right way. Members, I'll ask you to vote no on this amendment.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Curran.
Thank you, Speaker. Just to put I've got a question on this. Would Representative Schultz yield?
He will yield. Representative Curran.
Thank you. If we're going to be looking at revising the enrollment process, could Representative Schultz give us a brief overview of how a provider gets enrolled?
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would say that this is absolutely one of the most important topics that this legislature is seeking to address. As was mentioned by Chair Knorr, and which, again, I've been complimentary to both Chair Knorr and Chair Schomacker on their ability to work together to find solutions that are found in the underlying bill. And that prior authorization and that evaluation that we go through that are now happening, that's new, by the way, right? That new process is really important. And what I'm seeking to do here with this amendment is to add additional guardrails for us to ensure that the people who are providing services in Minnesota are people who have a 990 on file, that they are appropriately registered with the state of Minnesota as an organization, and that ultimately that what we're doing and who we are allowing to be licensed or enrolled or to receive public money is that those folks are all very, very qualified and eligible to receive public money. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Curran.
Thank you, Speaker. There was not an answer or a brief overview of how providers become enrolled. Before I finish, though, I would like to give Representative Schultz another chance if he would yield.
Representative Schultz, will you yield? He will yield. Representative Curran.
Thank you, Speaker. Representative Schultz, although you didn't describe what enrollment looks like right now and what the reality is to become a provider in Minnesota, you did mention that you would like to put guardrails around that process. If you could talk about in which part of that process you intend to put such guardrails around.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the front side, to be quite clear, to be eligible, you would need to be able to provide this information to ensure that you are appropriately registered with the state, that we are able to review your financial records going back 3 years, and that in addition to that you're able to provide the Form 990 to ensure that you are in accordance with federal law. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe that should be on the front side of any enrollment.
Representative Curran.
Thank you, Speaker. I appreciate the highly technical and in-depth description of the front side. when we're talking about a state agency and providers that are providing critical services to our most vulnerable Minnesotans. The explanation that we got, if the representative offering the amendment understood the enrollment process, could be interpreted as a no, and that's exactly how we should vote on it. Thank you.
Further discussion. I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise with concerns on lines 1.17 through 1.18. As I look at it, it says you have to have proof that the vendor or individual or provider has performed services for the most recent 3-year period. That's the number one thing. What this provision does, instead of preventing fraud, does something worse. It prevents new people from entering any of the areas of services that we need people in. New doctors that are coming out of medical school because they don't have 3 years of experience coming out. You've got new nurses coming out. You've got new mental health practitioners coming out. What it successfully does is says all the new people that are coming out and graduating will not be able to be paid for their services because they don't have a history for the past 3 years. As a result, I raise to encourage a red vote on this and also let people know we have to be careful how we plan on attacking fraud out there, because when we're careless, we do more damage to our state than we do in terms of saving money for our people. We have to have both in mind, taking care of our people and making sure we've got the right accountability, and this fails in the area of taking care of our people.
Further discussion. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Schultz, for bringing this amendment. I appreciate the concerns that have been raised by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, but I think we have to understand where we have been for the last 8 years. So we have people who enroll to be providers of housing stabilization, integrated community supports, a lot of these waivered Medicaid services, and they have no experience. They often have no location. They have no financials. They haven't registered with the Secretary of State, or if they have, they've let it lapse. They've not provided 990s, or in some cases, the 990s have been revoked by the federal government, and the state still says they can be a provider. We have lost the plot on how to make sure that people who want to provide services are actually capable of providing services. And it's a very simple, kind of basic internal control mechanism to make sure that they have registered with the Secretary of State, that if they're a nonprofit, they have 3 years of 990s, and that if they're not a nonprofit, they have 3 years of audited financials to make sure they will be good stewards of taxpayer money. We have groups that literally fill out a form and become enrolled as a provider, and they've done none of those other things, and they're still allowed to bill the taxpayer for millions of dollars. So this is just common sense, trying to get basic internal controls to be followed, and I encourage a green vote. Thank you.
Further discussion. I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minnesota needs strong standards. We need to ensure that as it relates to the providers who do the things that are providing services related to Medicaid, that those people are qualified, that they are thoroughly vetted, that they have done their work, that they are in line with state business filings, that they have their Form 990s if they're a nonprofit, that all of those things are in line, which is exactly why, Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a roll call on the this amendment.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To just wrap this in a bow, let's ensure that the people providing Medicaid-funded programs, that they are who they say they are, and that they are qualified to do the job that we ask them to do. I ask for your green vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Jones.
Go ahead.
Jones, no.
Jones votes no. Momani Hiltzley.
Omani Hilsley, no.
Momani Hiltzley votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 62 yeas and 67 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Schultz moves to amend Senate File number 4476 as amended. The amendment is coded 019.
I recognize a member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would begin by saying, members, if it hasn't reached your desk already, you can find these amendments now online on the floor amendment page. And that's the same for the folks who are watching and listening at home. But here, members, we have a really good opportunity to do good work while not going as far as some would want, namely Representative Niska. You know, he has the Fraud Isn't Free Act, which is something that would be really important for us to adopt, and I do support that. But at this time, members, I'm asking for your support on this RA 26-019 amendment because this provides the actual accountability measures to ensure that people who are in front of the legislative auditor, that they're providing the accurate information. And if someone were to fail to do so, that they would be held accountable by being guilty of a gross misdemeanor. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a roll call on this amendment.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I look forward to our discussion.
Discussion. I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think maybe I'll ask Representative Schultz just to clarify something. I believe that this applies employee or officer of the state. Are legislators employees or officers of the state, Representative Schultz? I think the answer might be yes.
He will yield. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Representative Pinto, I hadn't considered that. You know, if you're asking what my intention would be, if you, Representative Pinto, gave inaccurate information to the legislative auditor, and it had to do with theft, embezzlement, and unlawful use of public funds or property, I do believe that you should be held fully accountable under the law.
Further discussion. Pinto, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Schultz. I agree. We do not want people making false statements to the legislative auditor. I will note, though, the way that this is written is it's not about false statements. It's about failure to report. So if, for example, let's say there was a whistleblower portal or something that was being operated by one of the caucuses and collecting information, and there was information about unlawful use of public funds, if the information about every one of those every one of those incidents was not promptly reported in writing to the legislative auditor, that would be a crime. I don't know that that is your intent, Representative Schultz. I will note this is currently a requirement under law. We want to make sure that when an employee or officer of the state has evidence of theft, embezzlement, unlawful use, we want to make sure that is reported to the legislative auditor. I will admit some hesitation, though, about turning that into a gross misdemeanor crime. That is a fairly high-level crime. We're talking about not just about a falsehood, which I agree is very concerning, but about a failure to hand over information. So again, if a legislator or an employee, let's say you've got an employee of Department of Human Services, for example, who is not themselves, because a reminder, this isn't about them unlawfully using funds. If they have knowledge someone else is unlawfully using funds, maybe they have concerns about their own privacy, concerns about their own status as a whistleblower, this would make them a criminal, a gross misdemeanor criminal, if they don't turn information over to the legislative auditor. I am not aware of the concern that you're addressing here, that making criminals out of folks failing to provide this information is the right approach to take. Members, I would urge a no vote on the amendment. I appreciate, we want to make sure we encourage reports. We want to make sure that we're doing so not by imposing a gross misdemeanor crime on people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion. I recognize the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is something that I really think that we all need to take a breath. So just take that moment right now, take a breath and say, should someone who is aware of fraud is aware of theft, embezzlement, and use and unlawful use of public funds or property, should they be communicating with the Office of the Legislative Auditor? Yes or no? Because, Representative Pinto, you and I have sat in the exact same rooms for the last 2 years in the Fraud Prevention Committee, when whistleblowers have been in front of our committee, and we have heard in that committee about how their own supervisors have downplayed fraud. Their supervisors have told them to edit reports so that the agency and the department is not implicated further by the legislative auditor or by the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension or the FBI. So, Mr. Speaker, after we've all taken a breath, I think that this is pretty simple. If you are aware and if you have discovered evidence of theft, embezzlement, or unlawful use of public funds, you need to report that. So to all of the state agency employees, and especially at the Department of Human Services who are listening at home, first of all, thank you to the whistleblowers, the hundreds of whistleblowers who have come forward to tell your story, to ensure that we're stopping the fraud in Minnesota. What this says is that there has to be a level of accountability for folks who are aware of fraud going on who don't report. We need to ensure, members, that that information is appropriately reported to the legislative auditor and to other entities who provide law enforcement. So I encourage your green vote on this amendment.
And Mr. Speaker, I just need to respond, if I may, to something that Representative Schultz said.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just need to point out, Representative Schultz, your bill, your amendment makes every one of those whistleblowers a criminal themselves. Because if they have knowledge, if they're an employee of the state, and I understand that in many cases they are, and they have knowledge, they have evidence of unlawful use of public funds, I understand they go to their supervisors, there's concerns about that. If they don't report in writing to the OLA promptly, it has to be prompt and it has to be in writing. If it's not prompt or it's just oral or it's to somebody other than the OLA, it's just to the FBI or just the U.S. Attorney's Office, they're committing a crime under your amendment. Vote no.
I recognize a member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I find it hilarious, actually, that we are here on this House floor listening to House Democrats saying, whistleblowers, agency officials, please don't report. Don't report your information to the Office of the Legislative Auditor. This amendment right here just says that you are duty-bound to do so. And not that you are just duty-bound, but if you are aware of this fraud and you fail to report, that you will be held accountable with a gross misdemeanor. That's what this is about. Let's ensure that that reporting happens promptly. Because what amount of fraud is okay? What amount and for how long is fraud okay?
0 and 0.
The answer is 0. A zero tolerance policy here in Minnesota must be our way forward. I get it. So many of you have been elected during the same time as Tim Walz, and the answer has been to allow for over $9 billion worth of Medicaid fraud to occur in our state during the Walz administration. But I'm asking that that information be promptly sent to the legislative auditor so that we can stop the fraud in Minnesota. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Members, I'd like to remind the body that it's the custom and usage of the House to allow the author of the amendment the last word. I will recognize you to speak if you still desire that, but then I'm going to go back to the author again for a second or a third time. If you would like to be Representative from Hennepin, Representative Cleavorn.
If the author would yield, please.
He'll yield. Representative Cleavorn.
Thank you. You know, I'm sitting here looking at this, and I keep thinking there's something about this that's wrong, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And so I'm asking the author of this amendment if they intend for the legislative auditor to be a law enforcement agency.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My intention is that our state agency folks who work within the Department of Human Services and across other agencies, that they are doing their job to report any evidence that they have of theft, embezzlement, or unlawful use of public funds to the legislative auditor, and to do so promptly, Mr. Speaker, so that we can stop the fraud. That is my intention, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Cleavorn.
Thank you. It is already required. The new language is not that the employee or officer should report. We should all report. That's what's expected of us as officers of the state, to protect the resources of the state. I just find it troubling, and I would ask our members to vote no. I do not believe that the OLA is intended to be or desires to be a law enforcement agency. Thank you.
Any further discussion? I recognize the member from Wright, Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm confused regarding the premise that this amendment would turn the Office of Legislative Auditor into a law enforcement agency. As you can see by the text in front of you, it is existing law, and you just confirmed it, that we do have this obligation as officers of the state to already report credible evidence to the legislative auditor when we come across it. The effect of the Schultz Amendment is merely to put some teeth on that requirement to ensure that it actually gets done. So this is not a question of some sweeping change to how things work. This is a question of whether or not they're going to work the way the law intends. Sometimes you need to motivate people in order to do what they're supposed to do. Sometimes you do that with a carrot. Sometimes you do it with a stick.
Further discussion to the amendment? I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Good amendment. Vote green.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Jones.
Jones, no.
Jones votes no. Momani Hilsley.
Momani Hilsley, no.
Momani Hilsley votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 61 yeas and 67 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Roach moves to amend Senate File Number 4476 as amended. The amendment is RA 26-021.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Roach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for this amendment. I'm urging a green vote on this. This is the repeal of CCAP. As we've seen, the entire CCAP program is structurally broken, filled with waste, fraud, and abuse. It should be fully repealed. Minnesota CCAP, in Minnesota alone, Minnesota taxpayers have spent over $154 million out of their own pocket, $210 million from the federal government, putting a tax burden on many Minnesotans to subsidize daycare. As we've seen, this is a program that's been absolutely riddled with fraud, both including a federal HHS audit, OIG audit that revealed overpayments and potential improper claims affecting up to $230 million. We've got ghost daycares like the Liebling Center that appear to be open, but when there's audits there, there's nobody there, no kids. It's a problem, and I don't believe that it's up to the people of Minnesota and our state government to be subsidizing daycare, especially when it's riddled with fraud. So I urge a green vote.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
State your point of order.
Under Mason's Rule 3.21, motions and propositions must be germane. This repeals, Mason, under House rules. This repeals numerous statutes, 142C and beyond, but the underlying bill does not touch 142C in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't even mention CCAP. While I agree with the author that the fraud in the program is pretty extensive, this particular amendment is out of order.
Advice. I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree with Representative West and agree that given that the underlying bill does not include 142C or 142E, that this is not germane to the amendment.
Further advice. I recognize a member from Dakota, Representative Roach.
I mean, this is a finance bill, and we financed CCAP, and so I think it's germane, and I think we should defund CCAP.
Any further advice? All right, members. Well, I've studied the amendment. I reviewed the bill. I've considered your advice. I'm ruling that the point of order is well taken. There is an amendment at the desk. The Chief Clerk will report the amendment.
Engen moves to amend Senate File Number 4476. As amended, the amendment is coded RA 26-016.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This is a pretty simple fix. It changes only a single word from a may to a shall. Right now, we have remedies and penalties that are not being followed through with from the department after licensure agreements and requirements are not met. And if we were to change that may to a shall, it would definitely come with penalties and grievance procedures that allows program participants and some of the most vulnerable Minnesotans amongst us to be adequately compensated or receive remedy for having gone without what they need. It's pretty simple, and I hope that you guys will support my amendment.
Any further discussion on the amendment? I recognize a member from Olmsted, Representative Hicks.
Yeah, I agree. Vote green.
All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. There is an amendment at the desk. The Chief Clerk will report the amendment.
Engen moves to amend Senate File Number 4476. As amended, the amendment is coded RA 26-018.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This one is also a one-word change from payment shall, not may, be withheld to programs, providers, entities, or vendors that are found to have a credible allegation of fraud as defined on the second engrossment line 77.13. So why would we pay an entity and why would we have ongoing payments to an entity that has a credible allegation of fraud? This is pretty simple. Why don't we just put that on pause while we conduct that investigation, while charges are potentially brought, and if no wrongdoing is found, then those payments could continue. But during that time period in which we find that there's a credible allegation of fraud, let's put it on hold so we can protect taxpayers and the vulnerable Minnesotans who are being served by the program that is under investigation. So I would appreciate your support on my amendment.
Discussion. I recognize a member from Olmsted, Representative Hicks.
Please vote green.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The Chief Clerk will report the amendment.
Engen moves to amend Senate File Number 4476. As amended, the amendment is coded RA 26-022.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So this amendment would actually create a statewide payment prohibition following a fraud conviction. Novel idea, but if you are convicted of fraud in DHS spaces and programs or any other agency, why in the heck would we continually pay you in a different area of state government? If you're a convicted fraudster, you're no longer going to be engaging in that grift. We're going to say no more. So I would urge you guys to vote in favor of my amendment.
Further discussion to the amendment. I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Representative Engen, the third time is not the charm in this one, because if you read your bill, look at the timelines in terms of the look back that you have, going back to 1984, and so many other things that are not congruent with the existing law. And so this is not drafted in the right way for prime time. I think you had the good information at the upfront, but some of the provisions in your bill is not workable, so I will ask members to vote no. And I request a roll call.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Any further discussion to the amendment? I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Anoka, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Knorr. The awesome part about what we're doing right now is we can go back there together and we can make this right. I'd be willing to do that with you. Would Representative Knorr yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Engen.
Because this is so common sense, because Minnesotans would want this to prevent their tax dollars from going towards continually fraudulent organizations that are engaged in multiple or even simultaneous payments, would you be willing to go back with me and we can work on this thing together in good faith?
Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, because this is already in the licensing statute that already exists for some of those provisions. We will keep on taking a look at that as we go to conference and strengthen some of the provisions in there.
Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't necessarily hear a response in that, but I'll take you at your word for it and we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Jones.
Jones, no.
Jones votes no. Momani Hiltsley.
No.
Momani Hiltsley votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 61 yeas and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Engen moves to amend Senate File Number 4476 as amended. The amendment is coded RA 26-025.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. When we have true civil servants that are acting within our state agencies, they're employed by our departments, and they're conducting good work and trying to prevent or deter instances of fraud that they know of, we shouldn't penalize that behavior. We should incentivize it. We should reward people for being true public servants and not the bureaucrats that sometimes us conservatives on this side of the aisle might decry. This reward program that would be set up within DHS internally to reward employees who bring forward credible and convicted forms of fraud with a 5% stake of whatever is recouped. So I would hope that you guys would support this, and the over 4,000 state employees who've already let us know about whistleblower fraud allegations that they've seen within their agencies.
Discussion. I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Yes, we should be looking in ways to reward whistleblowers, but this is going beyond that, because when we do recoveries, there's a process that is required. There's a federal requirement for us to make sure that the funds go to the federal and the state, and there's several initiatives that are done. So this is not drafted in the right way. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to request a roll call on this amendment.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Knorr.
Please vote no.
Any further discussion to the amendment? I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I just do want to point out we have a State False Claims Act, so it's interesting this is this pretty short amendment says consistent with federal False Claims Act models. We have a State False Claims Act, which is already consistent with the model. It actually can provide a higher payout to a whistleblower of whatever variety. It could be employee, it could be a non-employee. It's much broader, it's much more effective. There's a whole series of mechanisms in place. Members, I'd urge a red vote. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the amendment? I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Anoka, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Knorr and Representative Pinto. The good news is, Representative Knorr, I actually mentioned the Federal False Claims Act model in my amendment. So to that point, I believe that this is well-written and definitely fits neatly in this section of statute. To Representative Pinto's point, why wouldn't we reward them, specifically state employees who are in good faith bringing forward credible allegations of fraud that lead to recovery? This is happening all the time. You have people who are remaining anonymous in doing so because they've been retaliated against. They've been ostracized by other employees or leadership within their very departments. That's sad. Coming to work and feeling as if you are the bad guy for being the good guy is pretty demoralizing. And this is one way to make sure that we start rewarding that behavior and not penalizing it. So I would still request your guys' green vote, and I would ask for a roll call if Representative Knorr hasn't already done.
He has called for a roll call. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Jones. Jones. Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, no.
Momani Hiltsley votes no. Jones.
Jones, no.
Jones votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 yeas and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The chief clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File Number 4476, as amended.
Third reading. Discussion. I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Thank you for the discussion about this bill with all the amendments. This is about restoring trust. Members, this bill addresses some of the challenges that we've seen in the human services. It addresses the challenges at the upfront, making sure that individuals who are enrolling, making sure that the recipient also understand their rights and responsibilities. It makes sure that we address the middle by making sure that there's ongoing training, education, at the same time prevention to address the fraud that we've been hearing all over the place. This is a strong program integrity program, and I ask members to vote green in order to address the challenges that everyone has been talking about. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also wanted to thank my co-chair, Schomacker, at the same time, all the nonpartisan and partisan staff who have made it possible for us to be here. So thank you, and I ask you to vote green. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Jones.
There you go.
Jones, aye.
Jones votes aye. Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momani Hiltsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 107 yeas and 21 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Lidley, for what reason do you rise?
I'm a little disappointed you didn't recognize Chair Schomacker. I just want to, it's his last bill. He probably wanted to give a speech.
Thank you for your consideration. Motions and resolutions.
Motion for calendar for the day pursuant to House Rule 1.21 and the notice given on Monday, May 4th, 2026. Frazier moves that House Law number 3658 be placed on and be considered first on the calendar for the day for Tuesday, May 12th, 2026.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is my motion. This file is for the ERPO law, the modifications that we've been making to this bill to make it stronger, to save more lives. I would ask for a roll call for this.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill has been on the General Register since April 7th. It has gone through 2 committees. There was unanimous votes through those committees. There were no testimonies against this. This bill is supported by local law enforcement here. There is no need for us to wait to get this bill done. We already know that this bill has saved countless lives in the state of Minnesota since we put it in place, and we can continue to save even more by making these modifications to this legislation. I ask for a yes vote on this. Let's get this bill calendar. Let's get it passed off the floor and get it into law. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Sherburne, Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Frazier, for bring this to our attention. And as you probably know, yes, it has been on the General Register for a long time, but it just came to our attention during negotiations for the policy package. I believe it was Thursday, if not Wednesday, that we started working on compromise language. That was the first time I was aware of the fact that it was there was a willingness to work on language that would be that would be beneficial or agreeable to both sides. I believe we are very close. Working with the different stakeholders, it is like herding kittens, as I've said. With every decision and language, it amends something, and I believe we will get this done. It is Monday. We have several days. I would hope that you would work with me on this. I'm going to recommend a no vote right now. I believe we have time to get this done within the time that we are allotted, and it is a good faith on our part that I and the others that are working on this bill want to get this done. I believe it will save lives, as you said, but we need to have it acceptable. With that, I recommend no.
Further discussion to the motion. I recognize the maker of the motion, the member from Hennepin, Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chair Novotny, for sharing those thoughts. We have been working on this. Here's my thought. Here's an idea. Why don't we vote yes to calendar it? Get the language done. We can bring an amendment on the floor tomorrow, and then we can be done with this. How about that? I urge a yes vote. You can get up and tell your folks to vote yes. We can get the language worked out. I'm going to be here late tonight. We can get the language worked out, do this tomorrow, and get it done. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Jones.
Jones, aye.
Jones votes aye. Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momani Hiltsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 67 yeas and 61 nays, with the necessary number being 68 in order for the motion to prevail, this motion does not prevail. There is a motion at the desk. The chief clerk will report the motion.
Motion for the calendar for the day pursuant to Rule 1.21 and the notice given on Monday, May 4th, 2026. Hicks moves that Senate file number 3210 be placed and be considered first on the calendar for the day for Tuesday, May 12th, 2026.
I recognize the author of the motion, the member from Olmsted, Representative Hicks.
Thank you so much, Speaker. That is my motion. I would like to request a roll call.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Hicks.
Thank you so much, Speaker. This bill has been on the General Register since March 9th. The companion passed bipartisan in the Senate, 46 to 18. It is a bill that expands the process of accommodations to individuals with disabilities. It should not be controversial, and there should be no reason why we can't hear it. I request a green vote.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And Representative Hicks, I appreciate your passion for disability discrimination. We're all opposed to disability discrimination. I have a younger brother who is legally blind and has benefited from a lot of disability protections. I remain puzzled by the drafting of this bill. The same questions that I think weren't really answered in the one committee stop it did pass. It either doesn't do anything or it does something that no one has really been willing to explain what it does. So the motion before us is to calendar it without a pre-filing requirement. So if the author will yield for a question.
Representative Hicks will yield. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hicks, do you plan to offer an author's amendment to this bill, or are you going to ask us to vote on the bill as it was sent by the Senate?
Representative Hicks.
I plan to ask us to vote on it as it is currently presented from the Senate.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Hicks. Then I do have a series of questions that I don't think were answered in committee and have not been answered to how this, in your words, expands the process. If Representative Hicks will yield to another question.
She will yield. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Representative Hicks. So the language in this bill says failure to engage in the process to determine an accommodation. What is the process to determine an accommodation referenced in the language you're proposing to add to the Human Rights Act?
Representative Hicks.
Thank you for the question. The process would be determined by the employer and would need to be made available upon request.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and or Mr. Speaker and Representative Hicks. Is the process in relation to employment different than the process that's already in subdivision 363 or section 363A.08?
Representative Hicks will continue to yield. Representative Hicks.
The process would be outlined based on what's currently in statute, but it, as the language is currently written, would give an opportunity to ensure that that process is equally followed by the person and the entity to which they are negotiating accommodations.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Hicks. Is the process, so your bill references the process in employment, housing and real property, public accommodations, public service, and education. Is the process referenced in line 2.6 the same or different in each one of those areas?
Representative Hicks will continue to yield. Representative Hicks.
Just like all accommodations processes, it would be based on the individual needs of the person requesting accommodations, which is the purpose of this bill, is to ensure that those things can happen. And although I absolutely respect Representative Niska's line of questioning, this feels like the debate we should be having tomorrow, not the conversation about whether a bill that's been on the General Register since 3/9 and has passed the Senate 46 to 18 should come to the floor. I would love to have this conversation first thing tomorrow.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and appreciate that, Representative Hicks, that you want this bill calendared. Unfortunately, it hasn't really had the committee work that it needs in order to do that. In line 2.8, it says that the failure to engage in the process to determine an accommodation in 2.8 says may be a unfair discriminatory practice under this chapter. In what circumstances would failure to engage in the process not be an unfair discriminatory practice under this chapter?
Thank you, Representative Niska, for the question. Again,
Representative Hicks.
Oh, sorry, Speaker. Again, it says may to allow for the ability for this to be an interactive dual process between people with disabilities and the entities that they are requesting accommodations for. And I would again remind you, we are not debating the bill. We are currently just debating whether or not people with disabilities who came and said, hey, this process isn't really working for us, we think this would be helpful, can have a full floor debate on this bill tomorrow. I appreciate that you do not want to hear this bill. I understand that it is something that you are not interested in hearing. My motion today is to hear it. If you don't want to hear it, just vote no.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and appreciate your advice, Representative Hicks. The concern I have is that I think your addition of the word may actually waters down the disability discrimination that we currently have under Minnesota law, in particular in the employment context, because it says that there are situations where failure to engage in the interactive process would not be an unfair discriminatory practice under this chapter. And so it's introducing ambiguity into the law. You said you did not plan to offer an author's amendment. So I think this actually harms the current ways that we have defined what accommodations mean and how the process to determine those accommodations happen. So I would like you to direct because the only thing you do is amend the policy section. You don't actually amend any of the operative section. So if you have the operative language in front of you, I would encourage you to turn to 363A.08, specifically subdivision 6 in the reasonable accommodation section, which says, among other things, quote, reasonable accommodation means steps must be taken to accommodate the known physical or mental limitations of a qualified individual with a disability. To determine the appropriate reasonable accommodation, the employer, agency, or organization shall initiate an informal interactive process with the individual with a disability in need of an accommodation. So if Representative Hicks would yield to another question.
She will yield. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Hicks. How does your language that says failure to engage in the process to determine an accommodation may be an unfair discriminatory practice change the language or the meaning of 363A.08 subdivision 6?
Representative Hicks.
Thank you so much for the question. So again, the language that you're referencing is about reasonable accommodations. This language is about the process of reasonable accommodations. And although I absolutely respect your opinion and understand that you're an employment lawyer, the Disability Law Center has stated and has provided testimony that this would strengthen. The Minnesota Department of Human Rights is comfortable with this language, and most importantly, people with disabilities have asked for it. And I know that sometimes in this place it can get a little technical, and we can sometimes be very focused on this to that and this and procedural and all of those things, and that's super appropriate. But in this instance, people have said, this will help me. The Minnesota Disability Law Center has said, this will help people with disabilities. The Minnesota Council on Disabilities has said, this will help people with disabilities. People with disabilities have said, this will help me. And one of the reasons that I'm not offering any amendments is, as I've stated, I think 3 times now, this has already passed off the Senate floor. And so I would like to avoid a conference committee and get this into law. And I would, again, request the leader, Niska, consider the fact that the vote today is not the bill debate. The vote today is to put it on the calendar for tomorrow. And I welcome further conversation tomorrow when we hear this bill on the floor.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Hicks. I will give you one more chance at this question because I think you maybe misheard the language that I read to you. You said that the language in 363.08 subdivision 6 refers only to the accommodation itself and not to the process. So I just want to direct your language, your attention again to the following sentence in 363A subdivision 6. To determine the appropriate reasonable accommodation, the employer, agency, or organization shall initiate an informal interactive process with the individual with a disability in need of the accommodation. And Representative Hicks, if she will yield for another question.
She will continue to yield. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Hicks. My question is, this language says shall, your language says may about the interactive process. So I'm trying to understand how your bill would change the meaning of this language here about the interactive process that mandates the employer to use the interactive process.
Representative Hicks.
Thank you so much again. It doesn't, because that's not the section of law that it's in. What this says is that failure to engage in that process may be considered discriminatory. And again, the Disability Law Center says this would be helpful. People with disabilities say this would be helpful. The most frequent group of people who go to the Minnesota Department of Human Rights are people with disabilities with disability complaints. We are trying to solve a problem, and those folks have said this is the solution. And if you do not agree that this is not the solution, then tomorrow, when we hear it on the floor, vote no.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Hicks, I heard you say that this doesn't change that. I think that's actually probably false. I think this, if anything, creates some ambiguity that might give employers off the hook for not doing the interactive process, which is the exact opposite of what you said this bill does. The fundamental problem is this is introducing ambiguity to the clearly, much more clear prescriptive parts of the Minnesota Human Rights Act. I think it does it again in 363A.10, which is defining reasonable accommodations in the area of real property or disability discrimination. So, Mr. Speaker, if Representative Hicks would yield to another question.
She will yield to another question. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Hicks, how does your bill affect the meaning of 363A.10, real property disability discrimination?
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
State your point of order.
May, since 101, we've allowed a lot of leeway, but Representative Hicks is right. The subject of the debate is not the bill itself. The subject of the debate is the motion to calendar this for tomorrow.
Representative Niska.
The bill before us does the exact opposite of what the author of the bill just represented before, that it expands the process. She said it's not controversial. It's a poorly drafted bill. I'm sorry. It's not ready. It needs more committee work. It likely needs to go to the Housing Committee if it changes the meaning of housing discrimination. It likely needs to go to the Education Committee if it changes the meaning of public services and education provision, 363A.12, 363A.13. Representative Hicks will yield to a question.
She will not yield. Representative Niska.
What are we even doing here? The 363A.13 says it's an unfair discriminatory practice to discriminate in any manner in the full utilization or benefit of our educational institution on the basis of disability discrimination. The author of the bill won't tell us how it affects that. The author of the bill won't tell us how it affects any of the actual operative provisions of the Minnesota Human Rights Act. I understand vibes. I understand being opposed to disability discrimination, but what we're doing here is we're making law. And this bill that's before us is not a good law. That's why the questions that were asked in Judiciary Committee were not appropriately answered. Tomorrow, we can take this up with no pre-filing requirement. I think there will actually be very little discussion about this bill and probably a lot of discussion about other provisions of the Minnesota Human Rights Act. I think that'd be a lot of fun, but I don't think that'd be a productive use of our time in this session with a very poorly drafted bill before us. It shouldn't be calendared. Members vote no.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Coulter.
Thank you, Speaker. Mr. Speaker, would Representative Rapinski yield for a question?
Representative Rapinski, will you yield for a question? He will yield. Representative Coulter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Representative Rapinski, I see you became a co-author of this bill on March 12th, after the bill got its second reading on March 9th. Do you agree with your floor leader's assertion that this bill is poorly drafted and should not be calendared?
Representative Rapinski.
Thank you for that question. I feel the same way that Representative Niska just explained my concerns with that bill. And I'm a big supporter of mental health and those sorts of issues. That's why I was originally on the bill, but I do have some concerns with it.
Representative Coulter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, again, to correct the record, Representative Rapinski became an author of the bill on March 12th, after the bill was given its second reading on March 9th. I don't know that that qualifies someone as an original author. Mr. Speaker, would Representative Nadeau yield for a question?
Representative Nadeau is not sitting at his desk currently, so I am assuming no.
Oh, that's too bad.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Finke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to, I want to thank Representative Hicks for your bill, and I do want to thank Representative Niska for his line of questioning, because as it happens, we had this exact line of questioning in judiciary, and we had members of the other side who were pretty convinced of the argument that you were making, and we had an opportunity in judiciary to explain why that line of argument doesn't hold up, and then the bill moved forward. You are confusing. I mean, look, it's hard. This is hard work. And the fact of the matter is not a lot of people actually know what the process of getting workplace accommodations for people with disabilities entails. And this bill is not about whether or not a workplace can provide accommodations to their employees with disability. You're right. They must provide agreed upon accommodations to their employees. That's not in question. What's in question is, do they have to negotiate in good faith about those accommodations? Do they have to accommodate people in the process of accommodation? And I know that people kind of have this idea who is like, well, you have a person who has disabilities and they've requested accommodations. Of course they get them, and then if you don't provide them, you're breaking the law. But that is not at all what the process of getting your accommodations met is like. And if you live with or love people who have many disabilities, you will know, for example, 75% of accommodations requests are denied by employers. And this is about those 75% that are denied. They don't have to provide them. There is no requirement in the law that your accommodations are provided. The law says if you agree upon those accommodations, then they must be provided. But talk to anyone who has to work in a workplace that is not suitable to their living condition, and they will tell you almost all of their accommodations are denied. And what this bill is looking to do, Representative Niska, is say there has to be more protections for people who have disabilities in the process of negotiating their accommodations. Because the power differential between an HR department and a person who is seeking accommodations is monumental. Absolutely monumental. And if you cannot even engage in a good faith accommodation negotiation, that is the process that needs the protection. That is the reason people with disabilities are coming out day after day after day to say we need help in our achieving accommodations. It is not a question of whether or not accommodations are provided. It is getting the accommodations in the first place, a torturous process for so many people in the workplace, in many other places. That is what we're talking about. It is separate from what you were talking about. And the process itself needs the protections. The process of that negotiation for the party of that negotiation that is the employer needs to be protected. It's a very different problem and process. Second, I do want to address what Representative Niska just said about whether or not this bill comes to the floor tomorrow and we have no pre-filing amendment and we have a debate about the Human Rights Act. And I just want you to know that we're not going to back down from a fight about my community because you want to keep the rights of people with disabilities out of the Human Rights Act. That sounds fun to you? You think it sounds fun to drop amendment after amendment after amendment attacking vulnerable communities in the Minnesota Human Rights Act? Go ahead and do it. We will fight for the rights of all Minnesotans, and we will not allow certain communities to be weaponized against the rights of others. That's disgraceful and disgusting, and if you enjoy it, that's fine. Have fun. We will fight for the rights of our people.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to reground us about what conversation is occurring right now. It's whether or not to have a bill calendared that allows for accommodations for people with disabilities. This isn't about fighting for our community or making this about ourselves. It's about allowing those amongst us who do face struggles and challenges and sometimes disparities from having the opportunity to engage in a discussion. That's what we're talking about here. I'll be voting in support of this despite my understanding as to why we wouldn't. I think there are some questions that I still have yet to be answered. That's fine. We can ask those questions tomorrow. But this brings me to a personal experience at a job that I had during college. It was J-term, and I was working at a bicycle tool company. It was 10-hour days, long days of absolutely monotonous work that would drive anybody to insanity. But one of the best parts about the job is I got to see Josh. And Josh came from a day provider called Merrick, and he was referred to this company after demonstrating a real interest in bicycling, and so it kind of fit perfectly. And at first, Josh was not very comfortable at the workplace setting. He was cutting up cardboard and removing staples before putting that cardboard into a shredder and tidying up, making sure the trashes were taken out. And we ended up having a really great relationship, and I still talk with Josh today. And he went and asked for reasonable accommodations so that he didn't have to try to show up to work when his busing and transportation was out for a weather-related issue. In the middle of a snowstorm, he doesn't have his Met mobility to get him to work, so those accommodations were met. He wanted to know if there were sometimes days that he could put in his headphones or earplugs so that he could just have a little bit more peace than maybe the job provided. There were times where he simply just needed to take an extra 15 minutes because in his head, things were getting a little too chaotic, and I've been there. I got a 2-year-old at home. I'm there all the time. So all of those accommodations were met, and they were met with grace. And why I'm proud of that is because the guy who granted that accommodation was my dad. My dad was the GM of this place, but he loved having the conversation with Josh, and he ended up taking Josh to Twins baseball games that I attended alongside him. I mean, this was years ago, but it's an accommodation, and it's a discussion that I think is worthy of being had. I just want to say, let's reground ourselves about what we're doing here. What are we actually engaging in, and what dialogue are we bringing to the discussion that either helps advance the goals that we're trying to achieve, and for who, or are we making this about ourselves and throwing mud when we otherwise don't have to? So, thank you.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I also want to kind of back up a little bit. There's been an incredible amount of discussion, very detailed, things on this bill, most of which I do not understand. But the question that we're being asked is, do we calendar a bipartisan bill that has been on the General Register for 2 months, almost 2 months? And there was a comment made that it needs more committee work. Representative Niska, Leader Niska, that's not your call to make. It has been through committees. It has passed through committees. It sounds like unanimously. It's on the floor. I have to agree, like it became almost badgering to me of Representative Hicks on getting into the detail of this bill. Let's have that discussion tomorrow. This is a bipartisan bill. It's been there for a couple months. We can have this debate, and I also do resent the implied threats of it's going to have other amendments on it. Let's just do the work. It's a bipartisan bill. Let's do this.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Lugar-Nicolai.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of Representative Hicks' motion. I think this is an excellent bill. I think it is a bill that we should calendar today and we should pass tomorrow. This bill makes changes to the public policy section of 363A, the Minnesota Human Rights Act. So importantly, it doesn't make changes to 363A.08, which is the parts of the law that refer to employment. That, as Leader Niska noted, already contains a requirement that individuals, employers, engage in the interactive process. Now, it does refer to other parts of the statute, however, including the prohibition on discrimination with respect to housing and real property, public accommodations, public services, and education. Those you can find in subsequent parts of the statute that I will not name because it makes terrible video. However, those are all parts that themselves do not contain language regarding the interactive process. I looked, I double-checked, I used Control F several times. And so this is an important change, especially for those provisions, but more importantly because this directs the policy orientation of the department. It is the public policy section of the statute. It is the poll star for how the department is to interpret and enforce the law. And so it is important that we make these changes to ensure that individuals who are seeking public accommodations, seeking housing, seeking equal access to education know that when they are in a situation in which they may need accommodations, there is going to be a requirement that they are met halfway or partway or in any way necessary for them to get what they need, because as a society, we all agree that that's important. So we should calendar this bill. We should pass this bill. It is good language, and it will not take us backward. It will only take the department forward. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Curran.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you for the motion, Representative Hicks. This is something that is a long time coming. I'm quite dismayed by most of the conversation that's happened today, but I am glad to hear it sounds like we'll have support to get this calendared. As we head into our discussion on the meat of the very short bill tomorrow, I want to remind everybody that there was a roll call on this in the Judiciary Committee. Every single member who was present, that was everybody except for one excused member, voted in favor of this bill. And what this truly is about is people with disabilities being given the right or ensured the right that their employer will have a conversation with them. That's what it does. It's not difficult to understand, even though I know there was some legal words thrown around like absolutely probably not true. I think that was a pretty legal thing you could stand by. Absolutely probably not. Sure. As we go into this discussion tomorrow, folks, this is a serious, serious issue that Minnesotans who are extremely vulnerable face. Some we can see on their face or through their body movements. Some are invisible. There are people in this very room with such invisible disabilities. And I just want to encourage everybody to please approach the conversation that we are about to have tomorrow with the due respect that it deserves for the disability community, It is about nothing more and nothing less than supporting our neighbors with disabilities, and I hope we can hold to that. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And I do want to ground us in what we're doing here, which is we're trying to make law. We're trying to add clarity to statute, not ambiguity to statute. And the problem that I have with this bill, and the reason why it actually should go to a number of committee stops or else there's no point in passing it, is that it either doesn't do anything or it does things that we don't know and nobody's really being honest about what it does. So Representative Finke said that what's in question is whether you have to negotiate about the accommodations and that there's no current requirement to provide accommodations. Actually, in the employment context, there is a very clear requirement to have a process to go through to provide those accommodations. And this bill actually creates ambiguity in an area where there currently is certainty. But in other places where that clear, reasonable accommodation interactive process is not in the statute, apparently Representative Lugar-Nicolai thinks that now this is creating new statutory language in those other sections, but nobody has bothered to actually bring a bill that amends 363A.10 relating to real property, or 363A.11 363A.11 relating to public accommodation, or 363A.12 related to public services, or 363A.13 related to educational institutions. Those are the operative statutes where somebody looking at trying to understand how to comply with the Minnesota Human Rights Act, a company, a school, a government agency, they should be looking to those, they should be able to look to those provisions to understand what is the process that needs to happen. Our housing providers should have an opportunity to look at that language and provide input into whether or not that's workable in the housing committee. Our schools should have an opportunity to look at the language about what an interactive process would be in the educational context and provide input within the education committee. None of that has happened because instead of actually amending the operative language and providing clarity, what we have in front of us is an amendment to the public policy section that actually creates more ambiguity. I appreciate that there are disability lawyers and other lawyers who would love this bill to pass because it creates a lot more work for lawyers and judges to figure out what is it that the Minnesota Human Rights Act means after this. I fear for workers, disabled workers, that we're actually undercutting their protections. I fear for schools, for housing providers, that we are putting a litigation target on them without giving them guidance about what they need to do in order to do that. And I would remind the body that the Minnesota legislature did actually really foul up the Minnesotans with Disabilities Act and had to go back through and amend a lot of the litigation provisions because a guy named Paul Hansmeier, who then ended up in jail, did a lot of hit and run shakedown litigation because the Minnesota legislature amended the Minnesota Human Rights Act disability provisions without having thought it through carefully. So, Mr. Speaker, members, this bill is not a bill that is ready to be passed into law. It either doesn't do anything, it either doesn't change the law at all, or it changes the law in unpredictable, uncertain ways. That is not our job as the Minnesota legislature. We should be providing clarity. This bill provides ambiguity and uncertainty. It undercuts disability protections in some areas. It perhaps creates unintended consequences in other areas. This is not a good use of our time to take up this bill and to open up a Wild West style amendment possibility into the Minnesota Human Rights Act. We have other important work to do. This is not the thing that we should be spending our time with tomorrow. Members, vote no.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, the maker of the motion, Representative Hicks.
Thank you so much, Speaker. And I will just say, I disagree that passing a bill to extend the rights of people with disabilities when they have specifically come and asked for it is absolutely a good use of our time. Because it has passed the Senate, and so it will be, I believe, good law if we pass it tomorrow. I also think the statement that it will be the Wild West and not a good use of our time is a choice. It doesn't have to be the Wild West. We can choose, collective we and individuals can choose not to file amendments that aren't about disability. That's a choice. It's not one I'm confident people will make, given the things that have been said, but it is a choice. And if it truly does nothing, then I don't understand why the Disability Law Center and why people with disabilities and why the department have said it does nothing. That's not what they've said. They've said it would be helpful. And if it does something, the something is protecting people with disabilities against discrimination. And if that's not what we're here to do, and that's not bipartisan, and we don't believe in that, then I guess we can vote no tomorrow. But I do believe in it, and I think we should have the conversation. And I would appreciate a green vote so we can do that.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Jones.
Jones, aye.
Jones votes aye. Momani Hilsley.
Momani Hilsley, aye.
Momani Hilsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 68 yeas and 57 nays, the motion prevails. Motions and resolutions.
Moeller introduces House Resolution number 11, expressing the sense of the House condemning the practice of extrajudicial, summary, or arbitrary killings and upholding the principles contained within the Minnesota Protocol. The resolution is being referred to the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration. Nadeau introduces House Resolution number 12, a House resolution designating May 3rd to 9th, 2026 as Tardive Dyskinesia Awareness Week. The resolution is being referred to the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. Madam Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following Senate file herewith transmitted. Senate file number 3720. The message is signed Thomas S. Bodern, Secretary of the Senate.
First reading of Senate bills.
First reading of Senate file number 3720, an act relating to workers' compensation. Baker moved that Senate file number 3720 and House file number 4598, now on the General Register, be referred to the Chief Clerk for comparison.
Hearing no objection, so moved. Announcements. I recognize the member from Winona, Representative Rapinski.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to invite everybody to a celebration of Senator Jeremy Miller and his 16 years of service to Minnesota will be held tomorrow night at Burger Moe's. Starting at 5 p.m., there will be music, and I'm hoping that maybe some of our fantastic singers in this group would maybe grace us with a song or two tomorrow evening. Again, it's at Burger Moe's starting at 5 p.m. to celebrate Senator Jeremy Miller.
Further announcements. I recognize Representative Long, the member from Hennepin.
Point of parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, last week I asked about the status of Senate File 4067, and you informed me that you had been instructed not to report it. I'm curious if that instruction has changed since last week.
Representative Long, there is nothing at the desk.
Further point of parliamentary inquiry, Mr.
State
Speaker.
your further point of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, I'm curious about the location of the Senate File 4067. My understanding is that the Senate sent it over to us a week ago, and so I'm curious that I see that it's not there at the desk. Do you happen to know where it is? Is it in a drawer? Is it in a locked safe?
I'm currently unaware of the location. I know it is not at the desk.
Further point of parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
Absolutely. Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, well, I think the Minnesota public is curious about where the bill is to, and I know that folks probably have seen the statements from the Annunciation families that that Speaker Dameth had committed to having the bill come up for a vote. If we aren't able to move it through the committee process, then it's not going to come up for a vote. And so holding the bill, who knows where, and not allowing it to actually go through the committee process is the same as blocking the bill from coming up for a vote. So I ask, Mr. Speaker, hopefully when we have this same discussion tomorrow, that we can be at a place where the bill is able to move forward so that we can have this important discussion that Minnesotans are asking on gun violence prevention.
Further announcements. I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Sensor-Murrah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just wanted to invite members tomorrow. The Minnesota CDFI Coalition is having a spotlight on Minnesota Small Business Lunch from 12 to 1:30 in the Vault, featuring sambusas, egg rolls, tamales, and cupcakes. So please stop by. Thank you.
Further announcements. I recognize a member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to honor Statehood Day here in Minnesota. May 11, 2026, we are celebrating 168 years of Minnesota. And Mr. Speaker, I would just like the members to rise and no, just kidding. Moment of silence for all we've endured. Just kidding. Just to recognize the settlers and the people who made Minnesota in 1858 on this day, May 11th. And I also want to recognize the bipartisan work and especially the work of Representative Greenman to make sure that the electroleer that is shining in the rotunda now shines all of session rather than just on Statehood Day.
Further announcements. I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 11 a.m. Tuesday, May 12, 2026.
Representative Niska moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 11 a.m. Tuesday, May 12, 2026. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails. Representative Niska.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Niska moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails. The House stands adjourned until 11 a.m. Tuesday, May 12, 2026.